4-story extension that was added years ago to a 1-story home.
They've been in the first one. Okay. Ready, Jack?
Ready to call the meeting to order? All right, this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board is officially called to order. Adrian, do you take roll call?
Mr. Hogan?
Here.
Ms. Metcalf?
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Driver? Mr. Masters?
Here.
Ms. Lindsay?
Here.
And Mr. Bush?
Here. Okay, the first piece of business is a variance request at 105 South 35th Street, unit number 3.
Start with the public hearing.
That's me.
Okay.
I'm actually the petitioner in this case. Stay here, just sit here.
That's fine.
Okay, fine.
And so I actually had read the staff report. I wanted to come and add some additional information to it. I saw, you said you had I think, Mr. Wells, you said that there was an objection that came Friday. Was that on?
I've got one, yes.
Was that on the one that, is that this one?
Yes.
So I'd be curious to hear, because I haven't seen that yet myself.
I'll read it in public, hearing time, whenever we're ready. I don't know if you
Oh,
want to
yeah, that's
present
fine. I'll
first
wait.
and then.
Yeah. So I understand that, I've actually been in land use my whole career, and so I know that there's the need to, and I'm really nervous actually. That shows you the emotional attachment. Even though I do this every day, I'm very nervous because I'm so attached to the home at Mexico Beach. But I know that there's ordinances, you have to have ordinances to start from, that especially when you have this level of devastation and complication, no ordinance is going to hit everything just perfectly, but that's where we start from. So I was hoping to come today to look at possibilities for rebuilding. I did read the staff report, and I actually have wanted to share some additional information. And I know that the staff report talks about the need for fire safety separation, and I'll just hand you those. And so that 10-foot separation for fire safety is from the, that is something in your land development code. However, in what I gave you on the green side is the reference, that's the Florida, 2017 Florida Building Code for fire resistant construction. But on the back side, what it does is it says that standards will be determined by the table 302.1. And you have every right to be more restrictive than the code, but I think as I've been watching these meetings all along the way, the goal is to try to help people figure out how to meet the code as much as possible and support rebuilding as quickly as possible. And I'm anxious to build the home back. So what it states is that the building code, the Florida building code requires just a 3-foot separation with no fire rating wall, and you can actually build up to the lot line if you build a firewall. So I know the basis of the staff recommendation was because you needed to have that separation in order not to infringe on the property rights of my neighbor, which I get, and I totally understand. But if looking at, since it's a code requirement and not a Florida, your local ordinance requirement, that it be a 10-foot separation, and not a Florida building code, then just like the setbacks, you have the authority to issue a variance. So my point is, by having a 6-foot setback, it would in no way infringe on her property rights. She could build all the way up to the property line and be consistent with the Florida building code. And in fact, if I'm able to build a separate house in the center of my lot, it would actually it would broaden her property rights, because it would not require her to attach. She'd have the option to build a standalone structure on the same footprint, or she would then, if she decides she's going to buy a sliver of land to the property next to her, and which they, I know she mentioned that in one of our discussions, then I would actually be boxing her in if I built all the way up to the property line. It would box her in and make her have to go 10 feet over. Whereas if I go 6 feet inside on my lot to rebuild, that basically lets me do what I need to do and has no impact to her rights whatsoever. Because At the time, last we spoke, there was no, they didn't have insurance, so they weren't rebuilding. And I don't know when they would, it's been a couple of months, but we talked for a little while about perhaps selling her lot. She wanted to wait and see. It was understandably an inherited thing from the family, and just kind of see what was gonna happen. And I understand that, but I don't wanna have to, I'd like to, I feel I love the property. I also feel a responsibility to rebuild, to help the city. And I think by considering the flexibility allowed by the Florida Building Code, which actually, again, I think gives her more options. But 6 foot back from the property line, she could have windows. She could just build whatever she wanted. She wouldn't even have to build a firewall at 6 feet back if I have a 6 foot setback. I didn't see any issues referenced for the northern setback. That neighbor was a good bit away. So, that is basically, where I'm coming from. I found it's going to cost about twice as much to build back than what I paid for it. To make that huge investment and to build half of a duplex and have no idea when someone would connect to it. Will it be 1 story? Will it be 2 story? I'm going to try to build above the code requirement as much as I can afford. I know 140 is the requirement. If I can afford it to build more, I'd like to do that. And not knowing what the person next to me is going to be built to those are a lot of variables and a lot of investment to make without, with having a lot of those unknowns. So that's why I'd like to be able to build a standalone home and in no way infringe on her rights to build her own standalone home. So that's really all I have to say.
You need to open the public hearing and hear from the public on this issue, Jack.
Are there any other public comments on this issue?
Can I ask a question? Can you show me where you are, where you're from? I'm just curious. I'll tell you who I am too, sorry.
Okay. So this is my property right here.
This one?
Yes, it was a triplex.
Mm-hmm, I
But-
remember.
It was a triplex. This owner prior to the storm bought the land next to it, and so
Mhm.
he's definitely not rebuilding. He said he's got a more than normal lot now, so he won't be building an attached. He's gonna use that big lot to build his own house.
We're right here.
Oh, this is your in my backyard. Yeah, dogs probably barked at each other.
Yeah, so I'll be really brief, but my name is Chris Hilliard. I'm partners with my 2 brothers in Hilliard Properties. We inherited this from our parents that built duplexes there in 1972. And so, of course, it's locked away, there's nothing but a foundation. You guys have heard this story a lot of times. And so, but my 2 brothers, they don't want to build, but I would like to. So, anyway, I got the letter, I didn't know what it was about, I just wanted to hear,
Similar
You know,
situation.
and it means a lot to me too, by the way. And
Mhm.
you guys are doing a great job, so I just want to encourage you, and I'll hush and let you continue.
So this was a triplex, and now 2 of you want to build individual homes?
Well, I don't know, there was a triplex, I was on one end, and then the one on the other end, he bought additional land next to him, so he's gonna build a larger home on that land. I'm on the other end and would like to rebuild, and then there's the owner in the middle who was uninsured, and the last I spoke with her was not sure what she was gonna do.
So you would still have a single
I would have
home,
a single family.
regardless of what the middle person is
I would-
doing?
Correct, I would have a single family home regardless of what the middle person is doing, and it would be separated by the 6 feet
Is our
setback.
middle home, has it been taken down?
These were completely taken away to the slab except by the storm.
So it wouldn't hinder building?
No, other than just the slab. It's only a concrete block high.
Anything else from the public?
The one I have, everybody's got a copy, there's a survey on the back. I can't read the survey, I don't know what it says. It says, to whom it may concern, I've attached a copy of the original survey that was done on the unit in question. I own the middle unit number 2. As you can see, my property is only 21 foot wide and was built on the property line. I do not have any land on either side to add to a variance. If I had to add land, I would have no lot to build on. So as you can see, I cannot agree to this unless it is written in that I would not have to add any land on either side of my property. If you have any questions or need to contact me, you may do so via email or phone. And the property is owned by me, Susan Buchanan. I can also send a copy of the warranty to you if you need it. Thanks.
And that was my concern too, when I was reading this, about the other people's property. And we were trying to get away from non-conforming structures and property. And this lady here, I think she's justified what she's saying. Yes, we offer the variance, but if she builds, I mean, they'll be so close to each other. I mean, I think, personally, I think we're doing an injustice to this Miss Buchanan by approving a variance to 6 feet. But that's just my opinion. And that's the trouble when you have duplexes and triplexes and all that, is when something like this happens, no one really foresees it. And it's a tough decision to make.
I don't quite understand the letter of objection. When she's talking about, she would have to let,
If there's two single-family homes, they need to be 10 feet apart. So she has to come 4 feet off her property line if we allow this one to go 6, thus making her lot even smaller.
If I could respond, that's per your
Okay.
code, but you could vary that.
It's per city code.
Or the city code, but the fire
That's where the
code,
variance is from.
but the,
okay,
The request is a variance from that code.
okay, if you stick to the 10 foot, but if you vary it and make it 6, then the lady in the middle will have a 3-foot setback, is that right? 4.
And keep in mind that the variances the variance request is a setbacks variance.
Right.
The minimum 10 feet between structures is not a setback, that's been in the Mexico Beach land development regulations for a long time.
That's not a fire deal? I
It
mean,
is part of fire, and when I talked to both Bo and our fire chief, 3 feet, that's really difficult to fight a fire with the 3 foot between two buildings. That
Right.
might be minimum code, but it's pretty challenging unless you have the right equipment.
So if the variance is not granted, you would have a 12-foot wide house?
correct.
Correct, okay.
And this, Ms. Buchanan is the one that you've had conversations with?
We
and so-
talked originally to see if perhaps she wanted to sell her property because, or she wasn't insured, she just wasn't sure at that point. So when, I read the fire code to see that she could actually, based on your ordinance, have the right to go to the edge, as long as there was,
So if we look at Mexico Beach Code, and I'm this Buchanan, if this variance was granted, walk me through the math, because I haven't
It would
planned this out,
require,
what would they then have to do?
she would have, then the person in the middle would be left to try to figure out, she would have to bring hers in to meet the 10 foot. Cause what is before you today is the boundary setbacks, the side setbacks, not the 10 feet between buildings, cause typically, those are things in the LDR that we don't typically grant variances for. The variances for setbacks, height, whatever we're doing, impervious. So the person in the middle would either have to comply, or as she said in her letter, something in writing that says she could go back. Now, remember that the council just adopted an ordinance that every structure can go back to its original footprint. So that is an option for every owner to go back to the original footprint.
Which in this case would be to build a triplex, or to go back and build a single family unit to the edge.
Correct.
I have a question.
But, okay, the single-family home would not, in this case, they couldn't build it to property line, even with 715.
Yes, they can.
They can build it to the property line.
That's
But
their old footprint. They can build on their old footprint.
You could build a third of a triplex, is that correct, whether it's in the middle or either end?
that's correct.
Or if it's a single family home, it's a single family home, you can build it on that.
So,
And
so she could legally build a single-family home to the property line.
She could. But then the second owner, when the next owner comes in, I guess Miss Buchanan,
Mhm.
when she's ready to build, so the first person building in that multi-dwelling structure would have to weatherproof their outside walls. Then when the next person comes in, they're gonna be on the hook to do the firewall, if they're gonna join and put it up to the property line as well. Then that second person is gonna be responsible for the
I
firewall.
could
I'm
add to
sure
that.
you thought about that, but
Yeah.
wouldn't it be better to build on the property line with a firewall and just use your whole line?
Well, if I could put to that point, if I build 6 feet away, she doesn't have to build a firewall per the Florida Building Code. If I am 6 feet away, she can have windows, she doesn't need a firewall, and as you mentioned to your ordinance, she could build to the property line based on the ordinance you just passed. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have the 6 feet away. Again, 'cause you have those issues of adjoining, I don't know what stylistically if they match, I don't know if it'll be a 1-story or a 2-story, I have no control over what she would build. And she might not build, and I would be sitting there for possibly 15 years with no windows on the side of my house. You know, all those variables that go when you don't know what's gonna be built on the other side. So when I saw you had passed that ordinance, it seemed like a very fortuitous thing, because if I'm 6 feet back, she could do whatever she wants up to that property line.
She could, if you were 10 feet off the property line, then she could build it to the property line. But if you're only 6 foot off, she builds to the property line, she can't, because there has to be 10 feet between structures.
Per your land development code, so you do have, I know you haven't historically varied from that, but
We
this
would
is,
have to grant variance
You
to
would
her
have
too, is what
you
you're saying.
have the right, this is, and I think I'm the first one coming forward with a variance, or this
No.
second?
No.
Okay, but that, you know, it's unusual circumstances here. So I know if it's in the the land development code, then you'd have to.
So your position for not building on the old footprint is for the benefit of the person in the middle?
It would give her more options, honestly. It would, you know, it would allow me more flexibility, but honestly, it would give her more options.
So would this be a variance to the setback or to the land development code?
It would be the setback and that 10 foot, which we haven't in the past. I don't recall us ever doing a variance from something that's a minimum distance between buildings.
Well, we did this 2 meetings ago, right? We had somebody in here asking for a wider,
Yes.
But
and you're not having-
you guys denied it, you didn't approve it.
yeah, but I mean, it was this situation.
Same situation, and you did not approve that one.
Can I ask a question? If the lady in the center was willing to build a duplex with you, would that have been an option for you?
Possibly, when we talked, she said she had no plans.
Because I understand that there's a bigger lot on the other side,
Right.
so
He's
this
not-
gentleman has enough room and doesn't need to worry about
Right.
the situation. But that would be a consideration for you are you willing to wait until she, I mean, you have 3 years to build back on the same footprint, but are you willing to wait at all until she makes up her mind what she's doing?
That
Just a
would-
question.
Sure, a fair question. That would cost me about $40,000 or $50,000 because of my insurance. It will pay within the first year for code and ordinance. So for that additional cost from that I have to do for the elevation, for the storm windows and the storm proofing, the insurance will only pay that additional money if I build back within the first year. So it would cost me a significant amount of money and might make it where I can't rebuild as you know,
And
same
I'm
as
assuming you've had a lot of conversations with the lady in the middle.
We've had a couple of conversations and several, and to the point that it's, you know, she said she just doesn't know what she was doing at this point, and so she knows that I was proceeding with everything.
So you don't think talking to her again would benefit you?
I'm open to it, but I don't think it would benefit. I really don't. I don't wanna be negative, obstructionist, but I don't know that there are any more answers than there were before.
Only the general feel if you've spoken to her, what it is she wants to do. I mean, she's gonna have to do probably something, so. Okay, thank you.
Does the city have a position on this, or staff recommendation?
Just the staff recommendation is, we put in the staff recommendation that we're gonna leave that up to you guys. You can grant a variance based on the hardship of the land, and that is a narrow lot,
Well,
but
the last
there are
one was
options.
denied, but that was before, that ordinance 715 went into effect.
they were still approving them. They already agreed, but then they just adopted the blanket ordinance to avoid all of
Yeah,
the variances.
Did the council pass one, so we recommended 89?
They do not.
They did not pass it. They followed your recommendation.
now,
I have a question. So right now I have with the 7.5 on either side, I could build that. 7.5 setback on either side for a 12-foot house, I could do that. And there was no problem on the northern side, with the variance request, at least not that I saw in the staff report. I need to try to get to a 14-foot house, so if it helps, I mean, there was an alternative, if I keep on the southern side, just stick with the 7.5-foot setback, and then if I could go to 5 feet on the northern half, which is actually what was platted.
what is on the other side of the house?
On the other side, it was another house, but there was about 12 to 15, I think it was about 12-foot separation. There was not an immediate adjoint, it was a driveway, it was big enough for a boat, so it wouldn't have the same problem here. It was a duplex that was actually oriented to the other side of the lot, so it was on the lot on the other side. Straddled the lot line to the north. So it was a single family home, or a duplex, I should say, on the other side. They have a wider lot, not the same issues, so. If I could go to 5 feet on the northern side and then maintain the 7.5 feet for Ms. Buchanan's side, so that I'm not asking for anything different, that would allow me to then also build the home. The plat actually from 1985 did have that 5-foot setback there still shown.
So Ms. Bryant, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So on the side where that adjoins Ms. Buchanan, you're saying 7.5 there,
It's possible. but
and then on
that
the
helps.
outside,
Yeah. The other
ask
side.
for a 6 foot or 5.5 on the other
Right,
side.
right.
So if you do 5.5, that owner on the north side, they would have to come in at 7.5.
Right.
So that would give you
13
the,
feet.
yeah, the 10 feet.
Right.
But it's still the other side.
But it's just on, so you would change your request from a variance just for the one side.
That sounds like a good option. I mean, if there's the room on the north side of the building to shift it, the other way. I can understand the lady's objection in the middle.
I do too.
Could she resubmit this with a change to the other side, or can we?
Well, I think you could do that here because her request was
We could do
setbacks
that
from
here.
both sides, so you could amend that here, yeah. Since you're bringing in its, you could definitely do that here.
So what would that be?
It would be 7.5 feet on the south side and 5.5 on the north side.
And that would give you what you want.
That would help,
Could be
yes, that would give me what I
granted
need in order to have
Mhm.
residential construction, to try to build a 12-foot home, that's gonna meet the wind code, it's gonna.
And that would give the people on the north side their, if they get, would they have to build in their same footprint now? I mean, it's not gonna impact them.
I don't know what their footprint is, but they would still have to be 7.5 feet away from their side setback. If she's 5.5, 7.5, that'll meet the 10 feet between buildings. And that owner was noticed as well, that she was requesting, smaller setback on that side. So they are aware of the request.
You mean the owner on the north side is aware of
Yes.
this?
Yes,
And
they
the
were all sent,
Modification,
they were all sent certified letters,
and did we hear back from them?
only the one, and then
I had another one call that was also going to write, but did not. So, I don't know who it was. I don't even know if it was this one. but the other.
What is the current setback for the houses on the north side, on the next property over? How far,
where their structure is now,
yeah, how far are they back from the,
I don't know, because the structure's gone.
It was approximately 12 to 13 feet away, because it was a duplex oriented on the other side of the lot.
But could they, this home, I know the city's position is to, you can rebuild to the previous footprint, but could that owner come to the side setback, which is 7.5 feet?
Yes. They want to go larger or, reposition on the lot as long as they meet the setbacks.
So it just comes down to 2 foot, is what we're talking here.
On that one
North
side.
side.
And we would still maintain the 10 feet access that's been traditionally.
Now, you're only gonna have 7.5 on that one on the south side, but that owner has the right under the ordinance to build to the property line. And she's only required the 7.5, and she's meeting that.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Could we just discuss this first?
Sure.
She can build on the current footprint without any variance. And the whole deal with this was to try and keep non-conforming structures out. So she can build the home she wants to build without requiring variance. I think we need to look at the here and now, not what might happen in the next 20 years. We have no idea what that other individual's gonna do. She doesn't know what she's gonna do. And I see no reason to grant a variance when we don't know what's gonna happen in that middle lot when she can build where she's gonna build. If you look at the conditions that have to be met for a variance, I think you can answer yes to 3 of them and no to 3 of them. So, given that not all of the requirements are met, and that she can build on the current footprint and get what she wants, I see no reason to grant a variance.
I think we have to take into consideration where our position, how our position is looked at, and how many more people are going to be in the same predicament. And I think that, we set things in place for a certain reason, nothing personal to any of these requests, but if we're going to, like the last meeting, if we're going to begin somewhere, then we're going to have to continue. And/or we're gonna have to stand for what it is that we've decided.
Yeah, well, there may be situations where a variance is absolutely required, but it's not required
Medical.
here because she can build
And medical would
She
be
can
an
build,
understanding.
in a current footprint, so I don't see any reason to grant it here. We may need to grant one in the future based on circumstances, but the circumstances here don't require it.
I tend to agree with that, because once we open Pandora's box, it's gonna be real hard to close that box. And this is only the beginning of the situations that we're gonna have to face. And we have to be, I feel strongly that we have to go by the codes that we've established. And, the reason that we built in this Mexico Beach was because we read the codes and we wanted to live in a place where those codes were enforced. And if we start not doing that, then we put everybody and their property at risk, because, you've established this is what it is, this is the rules we're gonna go by. So everybody's gotta go by the rules. Otherwise, it's chaos, so.
It's chaos.
Chaos, it's, well, it's, you know, everybody is displaced. I mean, it's,
And everybody has to deal with it,
that's correct.
you know,
I agree.
so.
So then, as I understand, you could go back and build the house you want, and the only thing you're gonna risk is making the lady in the middle upset, right?
I'm not gonna
No,
build, I'll build, oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, I thought he was asking me a
No, no,
question.
that's fine.
I'll build it, I could build a 12-foot house, it would have to be metal construction instead of residential, which would be significantly more expensive, it'll be a 12-foot house with 15 feet of setbacks, which I thought might look odd too, but that's what I'm entitled to build, is a 12-foot house in the middle, and so that's what I would do.
She wants her own spot without the lady next door.
It speaks nothing to her, it's just a
No,
matter of
I understand.
maintenance.
The person, whoever owns the next door, I mean, it's, yeah. It's just-
The last one was difficult, and this one is too.
The next one will be too.
That's right, there will be.
Mm-hmm. It's a similar one.
I know you said you've spoken with her twice, but I'd recommend trying again, maybe the third time's a charm, and find out if she can sell to you or you can purchase from her, but I don't think I would give up on that.
So are you waiting for a motion?
Yes.
So I'll make the motion that we not grant the variance.
I second it.
Motion made and seconded. Adrian, you call for vote?
Mr. Hogan,
No. Not reading
what's that?
Yes.
So the
Yes,
motion
yes,
is
yes,
not
yes.
grant, the motion is
it.
not
We did that last
grant.
time too.
Well, yes,
Yes.
Ms. Metcalf,
yes.
Mr. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Masters,
Yes.
and Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a technical question in between these? Because I'm about to leave. Or not? I'll ask if you don't answer it. I thought I heard you mention that in 3 years that grandfather's dead, right? In 3 years, from what date?
October 10th.
From that day?
It was the adoption of the ordinance, I
Yeah.
believe.
I think that's.
But this lady doesn't build in 3 years. And she sells that piece of property. She's gonna have to build a 5-foot house, right? Would that even be allowed? Could you even build on that?
I think it's 12
It's
feet.
something to think about, because there's several of these properties around where somebody ahead of you guys, it wasn't you, that allowed these properties to be chopped up like that. And now these people own them, and they can't do it. They're gonna have a lot of trouble. It's not your fault, and you have a tough job. And again, I just wanna encourage you, thank you for allowing me to come listen.
Come see us again.
I will, yes.
And isn't that why y'all are allowing them to build back to the original footprint, so they can do this?
Okay.
Next up, 414 Highway 98.
Next up, 414 Highway 98, Unit B.
You know, I guess my
Well, it's
problem-
actually A and B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's both.
I guess my problem though, in these setback variances, when should they be granted? For, you know,
When those conditions are
yeah,
met.
okay.
Yeah. Pretty black and white.
It's in in Concord.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one was, the property's located at 414 Highway 98. A and B was a duplex with each unit on individually platted lots. Each unit is individually owned. The homes were destroyed during the hurricane. Petitioner's request would allow each owner to rebuild as a detached, single-family home. Petitioners have indicated that they wish to rebuild 2 single-family detached homes. public hearing.
My name is Deborah Willis, and I own Unit B. And originally, when we bought this 15 years ago, it was a duplex. It was built back during the 60s. Everything around it is single-family homes now, and the whole structure got destroyed during the hurricane, just the foundation is left. What the owner of Unit A and myself would like to do is we would like to build single-family homes on that lot. Now, the lot is 50 by 150, and what we're asking is a 2.5-foot variance for each of us in the middle, which would give a 10-foot for the fire code between us. And we're asking for 2.5 on the east and west side, which would then give us, it would give us 5 foot to our property line, and then, you know, if the other property owner had 7.5 feet, that would be 12.5 feet to their structure. Of course, if they came along and wanted 2.5 feet also, you would still have 10 feet for the fire code. This would allow us to each build a 15-foot wide house. Would sort of blend in with everything else around there. I would ultimately like to, you know, live down here. I'd like to be detached. The nature of the lot is it's extremely narrow but very long. It's 50 by 150, and we're asking for 2.5 in the middle and 2.5 on each side. All sides would still meet the 10-foot fire code. Now, I guess I've learned something here tonight, and that is that you've passed an ordinance whereby you can rebuild in the original footprint. But does that mean we could still be separated? Or would we have to go back and be a duplex?
Well, if the people on the other side want separation, then you can be separated. But before, the way it was built, there had to be a firewall between you.
Right.
So if they want to build right up to you, then there's going to have to be a firewall. You can still be separated if they decide they want to be away from you.
Yeah, we both want to be separated.
Okay, so if you build first, you build on the old footprint, that means if they want to be separated, then they got to back off from you.
Right, and that's not what we want. We don't want to be right next to each other. And I think the 10-foot, you know, the 10 feet between structures is a good idea. If we get the 2.5, if each of us get a 2.5 variance in the middle, we'll have a 10-foot for the fire code in the middle. If each of us get the 2.5 on the sides, there'll be 5 foot to the property line, and then our neighbors have 7.5 feet. It'd be 12.5 feet to our neighbors on the other side.
If each of you get 2.5 feet, how do you come up with 10 feet?
Because we're each.
2.5 and 2.5 equals 5 feet.
No, but we're going to give up 5 feet. We've got a 25-foot lot. If I give up 5 on the left and 5 on the right, then I've got 15 foot to build.
They're varying 2.5, not
Okay, so you're requesting a 5-foot setback, not a 2.5.
Yeah,
I
I'm just asking
misunderstood.
for the 2.5
I
feet.
misunderstood, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah. The
Okay.
way it's written is they're requesting 2.5 and
Yeah.
2.5, so.
Okay, that's-
Which would give us 10
Now I
feet all the
understand.
way around
So
the
you're asking for
structures.
5 on
Which
each
that's what
side.
I thought we had to do for the fire code, was 10 feet.
What kind of structures were on lot 7 and lot 9?
They're,
There was a house on 7, but it's gone, and there was a house on 9, and it's gone.
yeah, it's
They're
all
both
vacant
gone.
land
It's all
currently.
vacant right
But
now.
I
But
mean,
it's residential, general and residential low density. So it's gonna be, low density is gonna be
But were either one of them a
112.
duplex or were they single-family homes?
They're
Okay,
homes.
single family.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure cause it's residential low density, so, and then residential general is to the north.
Yeah, 7 and 9 were single family. 10 was single family too.
And to the north across Oleander,
Across Oleander, I think it's single family. It might have been a mobile home.
yeah, I think it was a single family.
It was single family, yeah.
So without these variances, you would have a 10-foot house.
Yes.
Actually, there's one being rebuilt back there. It's been rebuilt. One of them's the single family that's been being worked on for the last 5 years. They haven't finished it yet.
Where's this property located?
Right on that.
Highway 98.
Right on 98, it's,
Well,
kind of right between Fourth and Fifth.
Okay.
Yeah, across from the dedicated beach.
The first standing structure that I saw was on the, I guess, the south side of big two-story home that survived the storm.
On that, yeah, it's, I don't know if it's finished or not.
Well, in this situation, it sounds to me like if the variance is not granted, I can't imagine building a 10-foot house. I guess you could do that, but this would provide for a 10-foot separation, right? This variance. She would still have the,
There's just one the other version,
I mean, there would be 10 feet.
Yeah, this is the exact same scenario
that we just talked about.
that we just talked about. They can go back to their original footprint, but they wanna separate, I think is what she's saying.
Yeah, but
So they're trying to figure out how they
If
can
they separate without firewall, they gotta have 10 feet.
They've gotta have 10 feet between structures, and if you approve, and that would be the case if you approve that
And the
variance.
difference between this one and the previous one we just did was we've got two homeowners that agree.
No, this one's almost identical to last meeting's one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not,
Well, no, because that guy could have built a house that was what, 14?
I don't remember
He
Let me-
could
let me-
go
let me ask
much
a question.
Deeper, I remember.
We say rebuilt to the same footprint. Are we talking about the existing foundation, or are we talking about the measurements? So one can be forward and one can be back.
We're talking, the ordinances for the existing footprint, where the
Okay.
structure sat before. But, I mean, that's an interesting, to
If
be
you would
able
have
to-
separation, if one built closer to 98 and the other one built closer to Olean.
Well, that was what I was gonna say, she's got a pretty deep lot, 150 feet.
Right.
So they could potentially go back to their same setback.
Yeah.
That would
Be
be a
right on the
variance you would
line,
have to
yeah.
grant, but then they could, one could be,
If you replat,
you could stagger them.
it'd be to a 75 by 52.
So you're
No,
saying
no, no,
you have a
they're
very
very
narrow
wide.
lot as it stands right now, and you're trying to make it more narrow rather than dividing it.
Yeah, but it's 150 long, so I want them to go forward,
No,
one way
they
back.
they both have a 25.
But-
50.
This would.
Neither one of us wanted to do that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, and how would you decide who's in the back and who's in the
Well,
front?
yeah,
That would
that's gonna be the
Whoever
problem.
puts your stuff in
Difficult to
first.
Yeah.
And again, we're not asking for anything less than the fire code, You're gonna have 10 feet in the middle and 10 feet on the sides, so we're willing to build a 15-foot house, so.
And they're not willing to build it back as a duplex.
We'd rather not. No.
But
Adrian, did you
if this is
submit
denied,
letters
you
to
couldn't
surrounding
do that.
property owners and any
That was
feedback?
my question too.
Could,
Okay,
yes, but we'd rather
so
not.
you have options.
I'm sorry?
You have
We
options.
have options.
I guess you could say we have options, it's just not the option we would like to, I'd like to live down here ultimately, and I probably would not do that if
Do
I had to be
neither one-
taxed in a
So neither
duplex.
one of you live here full-time?
No,
Do you both rent out your property?
yes. But what I would like to do is to ultimately, my mother lives down here, my two sisters live down here. I would ultimately like to live down here, but I don't wanna be attached to someone and live down here.
So with 715, they can come back. Now, I wanna understand one thing. If she built a firewall, one side of that house is a firewall, even detached, there still has to be 10 feet.
10 feet is in the land development regulations, and it doesn't have any exceptions.
No, so even if she put up a firewall on one side of the house, that wouldn't match, so.
Anything else among the board?
It's just, the lot is so deep, I wish there was a way that you
Divide
guys
that
could,
way.
yeah, that you
Consider
guys could
something
work
else.
it out with the depth of the lot, because I understand wanting to build a single family home, and the lot is, that's 150 feet deep, that's a,
But the problem is, one of them's gonna be with the water view and one of them's gonna be in the back.
Yeah.
So that's gonna,
Still have a water view.
yeah.
You
A
will.
lot of people do.
Yeah. I mean, if you go narrow, I think the last one you guys had, you gave him the option, he couldn't go any wider, but he had plenty of room to go longer on the home to get the square footage that he needs. So this is the same scenario.
We gonna go into discussion?
Yes.
Discussion. My position's the same as on the last one. She doesn't meet the requirements or the conditions for granting variance. And she has more options than the last one we looked at. So, I mean, it may not be what she wants, but I can't see granting the variance to give her exactly what she wants when she still can build to regulation.
Any other comment? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I did it last time.
So, can I ask a question
I think so.
before you do that? So, is it that I'm asking for too much? A variance in the middle and also on the sides, or, I mean, if you only gave me the variance, in the middle, I could still build a 12-foot house.
I see no reason to grant you a variance when there are other options available to you.
that's the sticking point. I mean, you can build back like you've got it now and have.
Mhm.
But I have to build a duplex back.
Should put a
Right.
floor
Right.
on.
Right.
Which is what was there, right?
And you could stagger it front to back.
Or you could actually, like I say, stagger it, and then the other person who's building with you can give you an easement for the back of that property, so you can get the required distance.
But when I bought the property, it was oceanfront. And if I
Yeah,
have
it's
to do
still
that, it will
oceanfront.
not, it won't
It's
be.
still
Yeah, the
oceanfront.
Not exactly.
Well, I think it is oceanfront, there's nothing in front of it, that's oceanfront property.
Well, if I'm in back, there'll be a house in front of me.
Whatever.
Would anyone like to make any more discussion?
Motion to deny.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Metcalf,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Masters,
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
He's a pro.
Miscellaneous.
I think you have 6 next month.
Pardon?
We need to be
The
consistent.
duplex, triplex.
We already said
Most
one
of them are.
parameter, non-conforming, we're gonna disapprove.
You
But
absolutely
there's still a
do
case
need
by
to
case
be
basis, and there's criteria to
consistent.
evaluate them.
That's me.
And it's very clear.
But she, like Jim said, she had
It is
a
a
lot of options.
hard decision.
For building.
It is an extremely hard
There's gonna be that
decision.
time when we have to grant a variance because somebody doesn't have any options at all.
Yeah, that's likely gonna happen. That
Yes,
doesn't mean you have to grant every one.
Right.
you have to remember that the people in this town are accustomed to doing what they want. And they don't like it when they're told no.
Well,
It's
nobody
the new
does,
normal.
nobody does, Lisa.
Well, I know that.
Nobody does, but
I
if
don't
you bought a
either.
duplex, you should understand that you bought a duplex.
Exactly.
You didn't buy a single family lot. You could
Exactly.
sell your duplex, the two of them could sell that, and each buy their own lot.
Yes, I agree with you.
And that's what I was saying, if, in this situation where there's some good options, front to back to me,
Yeah, front to
Is
back.
it
is-
better?
That's a great option.
rebuild that, so.
It's a great idea.
Two options there, okay.
All right, next.
So next up, commercial setbacks, land development code 2.02.02.
Okay, this one, came up, we have a commercial property and they were getting ready to rebuild and they were looking at setbacks. And when we looked in the land development regulations for general commercial, the rear setback is 20 feet. However, it's only 10 for residential. So and it's been in here forever, and I guess the reason it never came up is because we hadn't had any commercial building in forever. So now we do. So the request was to look at this and change it to match residential with 10 feet instead of 20 for general commercial. It still requires the landscape buffer, all of those things are still in the LDR, but we couldn't explain why, because for all the other areas, typically general commercial has a smaller setback, if not, they can build to the property line. So this one, we couldn't explain it.
This makes a lot of sense, because it also gives, since the remaining commercial property, most of them are so small, this allows you to build more of that commercial property piece, whatever it is, on that piece of land, so that makes perfect sense.
By going to the 10.
By going to the 10 instead of requiring the 20.
I was,
You've got more opportunities to use that commercial
Yeah,
property.
the biggest thing that the commercial owners have mentioned us is parking. I mean,
Exactly.
they've lost,
Yeah.
they're like, we lost 10
Exactly.
feet already.
I would think though, probably in the thinking was that commercial, you think of noise
that was my,
and,
that's exactly what I was thinking.
somebody building something, you wanted a little bit further
Yeah.
back, but that's just not an issue.
But it can be right on your property line next to you,
Yeah.
0 feet.
Yeah, the side setbacks could be 0. So it didn't really make sense.
Yeah, when I read it, it seemed like this didn't make sense and it should have been caught previously, but if there hasn't been building, it's the first time it's come up, so.
Now, it was general commercial, it came up as general commercial. We haven't had anyone ask for tourist commercial. That's it, the same situation, 20 with a 12-foot corner.
Is
So
somebody,
if you want-
is there a request to change this general commercial, or is this
For,
something that's?
we had a prospective development order for general commercial,
Okay,
and when they came in to start looking at rebuilding, they said, wait a minute, why do I have to be 20 feet from the back? And that's what brought that up. We haven't had anyone come in to question that on tourist commercial, but it's the same for tourist commercial. It
And I
shows
don't
the
see a
same.
reason why you shouldn't go ahead and change it to tourist commercial also.
yeah, that's,
I mean, there's a lot, all that property west of the canal right now is tourist commercial. So, I don't know what St. Joe's gonna do over there, but it makes sense to me to change it to 10 feet.
can we change them both at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other question, Nick just wanted me to point out that for all the other categories, the rear and the corner are the same, 10 and 10. This one would make the rear and the corner different, it would be 10 and then the corner 12. But if you look at public and recreational, it's 10 and 20. So it's not, he just wanted me to bring that up to let you guys know that for the residential, rear and corner are the same. Tourist commercial, it would be different, and maybe it should be, I don't know. Just wanted to bring that up.
It's less for tourist commercial. I know there's a lot of places in this town where it's not 20 right now, because of so many trees and particularly dumpsters on 98, you can't see 5 feet, so.
So you wanna leave the, well, I guess I'll.
I think we
wait
need
for their
to leave it where, the way
The
it is,
12
yeah.
On the corner. So I guess, Jack, you'll need a motion for, if that's what you guys wanna do on the commercial and general rear setback, and then leave the corner setback at 12.
Would someone?
I so move.
For a second.
Don't wanna repeat it.
There's a
Let
second.
Adrian write it up.
Yeah, there you go.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Metcalf,
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Master,
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
It's my favorite one to read.
Okay.
2.02.03B.
Okay, this
That's
is,
the back that we have, right?
right, you should have a single sheet that I provided you, the copy of 2.02.03. So I pulled this from the new land development code, and this starts right at the end of where she created the new matrix that shows
Mhm.
each zoning that you guys like. So, if you go down, so what was left is this term mixed use, but we don't really have a mixed use category anymore. I think you guys pulled that one out.
Yes, we did.
But if you go down to B, and this has always been in here, so what we didn't wanna do, because we know you guys talked about commercial and residential and commercial for months. And we didn't wanna try to assume what your intent was, so we're bringing it back so you can clarify what your intent is. B says residential development standards for structures developed or redeveloped in general commercial and tourist commercial. Residential structures developed or redeveloped in general commercial or tourist commercial zoning districts shall adhere to the residential density requirements as set forth above. In addition, residential or mixed-use developments or redevelopments built in GC or TC zoning districts may be eligible to have variances from the requirements of the LDR for development standards relating to setbacks, landscape buffers, and parking, if justified by the application of a PUD. So the rest of it really talks about just a PUD.
Yeah, the first, that was our intent, is what you got written here.
So you're saying that you expect them to adhere to residential
Yes,
setbacks? Okay,
Right.
not, okay.
And residential height.
And residential, it's not here, but height was another question,
It's
as
the same
well
thing.
as density.
In fact, I thought it was written, isn't there
Yeah,
something?
it's under, number 3 says setbacks for the perimeter of the entire tract for residential owned structures shall remain as front, side, rear, and corner. So then the other question is, density. So for density, and it's not here in this section B, but under general commercial, it has the density for residential in general commercial is 18 dwelling units per acre. So this came up because we have a small general commercial lot, and they want to put as many dwelling units on it as they can. And so right now in general commercial, it says residential is 18 dwelling units. So again, we wanna verify what was your intent when you guys were going through this.
I don't think we had an intent. I mean, I don't recall discussing that at all.
I don't. So what is asking to be done?
Do you guys want to leave the density for residential built in general commercial zoning at 18 dwelling units per acre?
So how will that impact this small lot you're talking about? Versus if we change?
What size lot?
I don't remember off the top of my head the size of the lot, but it would be any commercial lot would have 18
I didn't think we
dwelling
could
units.
have residential and commercial unless it was,
No,
maybe I'm
that
confused.
wasn't accepted.
Yeah, the council didn't
Wasn't
accept
They
it.
didn't? Oh,
So that's why we're coming back around for these,
Oh.
because we wanna make sure. So
I don't
you guys
believe
wouldn't have
that's
really
why.
talked about that because your intent at the time was that it
Yes.
wasn't gonna be allowed.
yeah,
So it's height, it's
right.
density, and it's setbacks for residential built in general commercial.
Boy,
We just need some clarification to then,
18 is
A lot.
a lot.
It's on a 100 by 100 lot, it's 1 unit versus 4.
Ouch.
That's
Quick math.
way too dense.
Ooh, ouch, ouch, ouch.
I agree.
Ouch. Oh, yeah, I don't like that at all.
So what are the options?
To leave it where it is or to change it to something else.
What is the something else?
That's up to you.
Yeah, and I don't have the knowledge to say something else. I just know that 18 is really, really dense.
Low density and residential general, they're both the same, right? In that,
Okay.
Isn't it four,
Let me look at this.
low
I think
density
there's
residential,
six,
4 or 6 per acre?
six, I thought it was six
Six
in
per acre?
each,
Okay,
That's the math I used.
yeah,
6 per
I
acre,
think it's
for
six.
low density residential.
Six, it is 6 on low density.
Is it six on?
It's 6 on
general?
residential general and low density.
And it's 18 in this situation.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, just looking at it, do we know what the density is there behind, across from where Two Kings was, that new development going in there now, 8th? You know what that is, Adrian? That's pretty
Yeah,
crowded
the little
too.
house.
Pretty crowded, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I can
That's,
tell you, the same person bought the 15th Street property and is gonna, to my understanding, put the same thing in there that they built on 8th Street. And I know that that's low density residential because I was an owner,
The one on 15th Street is,
that Malerba bought.
is low density residential, so that would follow low density
Right.
residential.
yeah.
Right, but I don't know what that one was behind, the condo units.
It was 2 acres.
Was it two?
It was 2
How many
acres.
houses are there? Are there 12 there?
12.
Okay, so
So
there we go.
Mm.
I think they look nice, actually, I like them.
Well, the 100 by 100 foot lot is smaller than my lot, and most of y'all know where I live.
Yeah, we do.
It's smaller than my lot. And they want to put 18 on there?
It's a lot of.
Think about my yard.
Yeah, I would say no more than 10.
I would say build as many as you can. City needs a tax money.
Yeah, but
I mean,
we
I follow
don't
the side of
want that, at least I don't want to be crowded like they are in other places.
Yeah, but you and I.
Street
can't
development,
buy
let's see what he has.
Huh?
I said, you and I are not gonna buy one. There's a lot of people that.
But that's, I don't want our city to take that character on.
It's going to be in all our neighborhoods though.
Again, I have, really don't have a feel. You know how big an acre is?
Mhm.
And actually, 10's a lot too.
10 is a lot to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, my lot is not quite 3/4 of an acre. And I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think you could probably put in mine, maybe 2 with me.
Well, that's less than,
So that makes,
that's less than the current density for low density residential.
I'm tops, I'm just saying if they were, a smaller type.
Remember also, if you're looking at the 8th Street development with all the little cottages that Malerba built,
Mhm.
the lot size on those was objectionable because those lots, there are a couple of them that are only 38 feet wide. Those are tiny lots.
I don't know, maybe the thing to do is to go with the low density residential, the general residential, and make it 6.
Mhm.
I think that's good, I like that.
You know, certainly no more than 8, I mean,
No, I agree. I used to live on an acre and,
yeah, I used to live on one too. and
you
I
know, I'm
can't
glad I don't
imagine,
have.
I
to
can't
own it,
imagine
but
18 structures
I
on.
can't either, but, it was a
What is
single
that?
family home and
Well, it sounds like a precedent for 6 on the other.
Is that commercial?
I mean, 6 makes sense, because that would give people
Right.
room, and
That's a prime.
We are in an
I
area.
it's
can
gonna make
visualize
developers
that.
angry, but I don't care about making developers angry.
Shores, it's 2 acres, 12 on there.
So this would, just to throw this one in when you're thinking about it, so a condo
I
building.
think it's,
Mhm.
Now, we consider it residential, I can tell you FEMA considers a condominium as commercial. So you have to keep that in mind, I think we only know of one lot that's large enough for a true condo right
Is
now.
that commercial?
I think it's,
Because you're talking 37 units or 100 mil lot.
yeah. That is, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that's commercial.
I think it's too. I'm gonna sell it tomorrow if we keep it at 18.
Can we differentiate between, well, the condos need the city council approval
They have to
anyway.
have council
So we can
approval.
go to 6, and then if the council wants to do more, they can do more.
They cannot grant a variance from density or
Oh,
height.
for density.
That's locked into the comp plan.
So,
And how many properties do we have now where you could put a condo?
I mean, I know of the one, on 15th Street, maybe two.
Maybe two.
That's a good place for them to be though. Sorry.
You know what lot we're talking about?
Yeah, the one that you just tore the house down.
If it's residential zone, they can build 37 houses.
I don't think it is.
If it's commercial, it's 111.
Yeah, I think it's,
$111 on that
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
Oh, come
Yeah, 18
on.
dwellings per acre.
well, I certainly prefer it there
15th Street.
than.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to go with 18, I just think that's
yes.
outrageous. You know,
Ah,
um,
okay.
So I say certainly no more than 8, but 6 makes sense to me.
6 makes sense to me.
I mean, do the same thing with that, but again, if the council we can't give variances for condos, it means we're not gonna get more condos. Is what it means.
Or they have to build to that density, which the math for that one lot is 37.
What was the math for that one lot?
37 if it's got a all residential.
37.
If it's allowed to build 18, it's 111.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I mean, either 6 or 8 with me is fine. I think 8 makes more sense, I guess, because we're talking commercial, you know, as opposed to residential.
What do we need to do with this? Is this something that needs?
Yeah,
to be-
A
I'll need
recommendation to the
I'll need
city
a
council.
motion and a vote on all three, for residential built in general commercial or tourist commercial, setbacks, height,
Yeah.
density. Just to clarify.
Well, I think we're clear on setbacks and heights.
Mhm.
We've already, you know, that was our intent to begin with, so that's kind of a given. We can just go ahead and do a yay or nay vote on that. And then the other one is the one we probably need to discuss a little bit more on the density. I mean, I don't need to take over this.
Discuss away.
That kind of makes sense.
You know,
Do we discuss more here and now or at another time?
I think we can determine that now. I mean, I think everybody's got a feel for that.
Yeah. so let's go ahead and do the thing on
The height and the
setbacks and
setbacks.
so we need to put together a motion to do that.
Go ahead, yeah. What am I putting together?
Uh-oh.
A motion that residential built in general commercial would move to a rear setback of 10 feet?
But you can't do that because
Yeah.
you
No,
Oh,
he said,
we
what
can-
can you
yeah.
do?
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, he
The
asked a
question-
question,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
answering
The question on the table
Yeah.
is residential structures built in general commercial or tourist commercial, do you want them to have to follow residential setbacks and residential height
must meet
requirements?
residential setbacks and height restrictions.
Okay. I recommend, or I move that we,
Okay, you got it.
to do all
Okay,
that.
I second.
second, you got it. Now we gotta do the other one.
No,
No,
we
we got
just
to
have to vote.
That's up to
After Adrian writes it up.
Just call
it's
for a
kinda
yea or nay,
complicated.
it's a lot easier.
residential structures, retail, commercial, residential.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Metcalf,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mr. Masters, Ms. Lindsay.
Yes. Regarding density, the one statement I will say is I'd rather go with 6 than 8 because if you go with 8, you can never go back. But if you go with 6, then, you know, if somebody else wants to
Request.
mess with it, they can.
Yeah, but then we have to change the LDR and the comp plan,
Okay, well,
which
that's
is
just,
kind of hard.
yeah.
Well, it's not really
Well,
hard if we really want to change it.
We're dealing with this odd situation anyway, because people want to, which is very unusual, build residential in a general commercial
Yeah, but they may
zone.
not
You
want
wouldn't
to
do
if we
that in
limit the
Callaway,
density.
or,
May not be worth
Yeah,
their while. if
right,
we
that may
limit
not be
density.
worth their while if we limit the density.
I mean, I don't have a problem with either one. I think,
I
I think going along with low density and with residential general, I mean, that makes sense to me, but because it is commercial, I can see going a little bit more, to try and produce more residences, but again, I can live with either one of them, so it doesn't make any difference to me.
Could live with either one, but prefer 6.
I'm the same. I would prefer 6, but can live with 8.
Was that a motion?
No, that wasn't a motion.
If you don't agree with it, we can go home. I mean, we can go home if everybody agrees, then we just go home.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree. We'll go with 6.
Well, you have to make a motion, put it on the floor.
So you agree that going with 6?
Just need to fill in the bubble.
Well, that's the majority right there, so make a motion.
I so move. That we move that to 6. Density to 6.
A second.
For residential buildings in general commercial
Commercial.
and tourist commercial.
Right.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Ms. Metcalf?
Yes.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Masters?
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay?
Yes.
I just wanted to notify the board while we're still in session here that I will not be at the June or July meeting. I'm going off.
North where it's cool.
You have to here.
Huh?
Oh, all right.
We just
Connecticut.
Oh, that's
So
pretty
that's
cool.
okay. Pretty fun. So I just wanted to
Okay,
let you
yes,
all know
yes,
that I
we
will miss
definitely
2
need to talk
meetings.
about this one.
So is this item number 3?
Yes,
Ordinance 674, design standards for residential construction.
right. This was adopted by the city council in September of 2017, but it was never incorporated into the land development regulation. So I'm bringing it before you guys tonight to say we're going to get your approval to move this ordinance into the land development regulations. We'll let the planner decide the best place to put it. It's probably gonna be where it talks about manufactured housing. But this is the ordinance that was adopted.
Looks like.
Under K1, just needs a little bit of clarification here. It's residential construction requirements, within each land use district. And it says all off-grade buildings shall be supported, that should be B, shall be supported and tied to a continuous reinforced concrete footing of sufficient size to resist the gravity, wind, and upload forces which might be imposed on such buildings. Dry stack blocks as piers for support of any structures prohibited. Talks about number 2 talks about the types of hardware. Number 3 talks about all new or remodeled buildings shall provide some form of architectural character. A covered porch, decorative columns, so forth. And number 4, it has to have an architectural feature that hides the, for lack of a better word, the crawl space below. Now, the one question that I have is, it says all off-grade buildings.
That's my question.
Is that accessory structures? And that's the.
Why are they off, maybe I don't understand off-grade.
Unless, if they're going on a slab, that's fine, but if they can't go on a slab, they have to be elevated, then that's off-grade.
So this includes everything that's on pilings.
No, pilings, it goes on to, there's something in here about the,
Yeah, I mean, my question was about the people that park their cars under there. I mean, that's not covered by this, right? They wouldn't have to wall that off.
this is,
No, they're just saying that anybody that's off-grade has to be supported so that it doesn't get blown away.
Yeah, I guess my question was why is it off, and my question was why is it off-grade?
You know, all off-grade buildings, yeah, I mean, we don't want, you know,
I mean,
storage sheds blown all over the place. So,
well, the Florida Building Code says they have to be tied down, and we're requiring them to be tied down.
right,
currently, but not the continuous concrete footing. They have
No,
to
just-
be strapped.
They have the straps, yeah.
What is the wind limitation on that?
140.
140. So if they can meet the 140, then I guess you still need the concrete, right?
For
For sheds.
For
and-
shed, it depends on
Accessory
size.
structures.
It depends on size. If it's a large building, Bo may require.
Yeah, I just had my shed rebuilt, and the last one they did in last August had minimal tie downs. This one, I couldn't believe what these guys did. I mean, it's not,
Mine withstood, and I
Yeah.
have ties.
the windows may blow out, the roof may go, and the walls may go, but
Mine's,
the bottom
mine
one, not
just
one anyway.
moved slightly,
Yeah.
and it just has tie down.
So if we go with all, keep the all off-grade
Versus
buildings
design.
rather than residential buildings. So who determines, whether what they're doing is adequate, or is it the building department?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't see any reason to change that at all. And I realize this has already been passed, but I definitely have a problem with telling somebody they gotta do dormers, extended entryway, a covered porch, decorated columns, whatever, because it's already a done deal.
But, I
They
mean,
only have to have one of those, don't
Yeah,
they?
one of those.
we're basically telling people how to
Yeah.
Yes.
build
Yeah,
a
and I
home.
have a problem
Yes,
with
and
that.
I fought this when it was adopted, but
Kind
no
of.
one listened.
I'm sorry, what is that, Lisa?
When this ordinance was adopted with these architectural details, I was quite vocal about it. You're
Yeah.
telling people what they have to have on their house.
And then number 4, just, when it talks about the area
That's
that's
understandable.
elevated, that's just a crawl space. If it's elevated enough on piles that you can drive under, that doesn't,
Right.
it's only for a
Right.
building that would have a crawl space.
Which is like a manufacturer.
So what are we trying to determine is where this is gonna go?
I just wanna, no, I just wanna make sure that you guys are comfortable with all residential
Yeah, I
buildings,
think so. So you mean all off-grade buildings?
where it says all off-grade
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah. I think-
So that does include the accessory structures?
Yes.
Some of them, this EPCI's engineer has said tie downs are sufficient. If it gets a large building, it may require that continuous
Okay.
footer to meet wind load, but most of them I think can be strapped.
Now, do these include your manufactured homes?
Yes, and I think this was the intent, was for those
Okay.
modulars. And we had modulars that did very well in the storm, and we had modulars that didn't do well at all.
And some of them that did okay.
Then we had a mobile home that withstood the whole thing.
Yeah, I've got a few of those, actually. I was surprised.
Quite a few of them.
And big brand new single family homes where only a pool is left, so
Yes.
Right.
mixed bag.
Right.
Yeah, it just depended, it was
That's
Now,
right.
there
That's all.
seems
a lot
like to me,
draw.
a lot of modular homes are coming in now.
Yeah, or what the cost of stick built is.
Well, yeah,
I wonder.
but, so what are we requiring them to do now? They're gonna have to do a continuous foundation?
We just met with some builders before the meeting.
Has that been in effect?
It
Or
was,
is it going to go?
it was
into effect?
adopted in 2017.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
I
know
don't
if
see
it's
it
been
being enforced.
enforced, but
Okay, that's my point. I don't
Enforced.
see it as being enforced at all. Okay. Cause I think one just went in and
Yeah, I mean, if this
several
stuff
of them
is
just go in
enforced,
and hadn't been.
Yeah.
we're gonna
not-
end
not
up with a much
since the
safer
storm.
city.
Yeah,
but before.
okay.
So we're gonna make sure it's in the land development
Yeah.
regulations,
I
so
don't have
it
a problem
doesn't
with
get
it. I just-
overlooked. Okay, so if you guys aren't proposing any changes, then that's
No,
all
I
I
think
need
it's
on
fine.
that.
I mean, does anybody think we should do something?
I just had that one question.
Other various and sundry items, is there anything else?
Just be prepared, you're gonna have a flood of minutes here next meeting.
Like, from all the way from October?
We're not gonna get all of them done that aren't done. I don't think I'll be back to
Can
October.
I okay that by mail or by?
Well, you must have a lot of them, because I never signed anything. That's a couple of
I
years
know I
ago.
can't.
I have a question, maybe it can go under other, because I get this question from people. Pickup and debris removal.
Has it been extended, or
Has it been extended? They were just picking up a house on my way here, right at the end of 19th Street on 98.
We are doing, we're still doing private property debris and demolition, the city. the FEMA program. So you'll still see that through the FEMA program.
Are you guys alerting are you writing letters to these property owners?
Yes, they have to fill out a right of entry.
And that one you
Well,
watched today was not us.
But I mean,
That was the homeowner doing that?
That looked to me to be DOT.
Oh, really?
I think maybe, when you
Yeah,
talk about
they are-
these
they are
cars,
being
people are
alerted.
doing nothing. to
the
your place.
property owners are being alerted, because I've got two
The-
properties behind me on 19th that have not been touched.
They have to, well, we've already started sending out code citations, but part of that, there's a letter that goes out with those, citations that says, if you need help or you're eligible for FEMA public assistance, they have to complete the right of entry paperwork and submit that. And if they're on our list, then the citation, we don't issue the citation. But if they're not on our list and the structure is a hazard or there's debris, then they're gonna get a citation.
What do you mean by being on your list?
On the right of entry for FEMA to either
Right.
clean the lot or take the structure down.
But my concern is personal, is that the house next to me, the roof is gone, and the owner has never even been down to do anything. And you know, there was food in the refrigerator still, and cabinets. And so now we're gonna get rodents
Nice.
and all sorts of varmints.
Right, and all those structures, unless they've applied for assistance to take it down or to clear that lot, you're gonna get a citation. And we'll go through the code
And-
enforcement process.
So,
Okay.
just briefly recap for me the process. They get a citation, then what? How long until they're in some type of violation and the city
It's
takes
a-
it down or writes
It's
more letters or
It's
what?
30 days, about 30 days.
Okay.
Before we can, and then once the 30 days are up, it gets a little tricky. If it's debris removal, 30 days. If it's demolition, we have to be a little bit more careful because you're talking about going on to private property and taking down their structure. So our attorneys are gonna be making sure that we're carefully adhering and giving owners. So I don't wanna give you a definite time because it depends on the shape of the structure, meaning is it a hazard, health and safety hazard, or not, but it's
Now,
about 30 days.
Are these owners gonna be charged in some way?
Well, the current ordinance says that if we go in and take the structure down, or we have to go on the lot and take any action, we put that cost on their tax bill. That's the current ordinance.
And
But
we-
we're finding that most people, when they get the citation in the letter, they're getting on our list, they're submitting the right of entry.
So if someone
on our
asks me that
list.
question, can I direct them to the city?
Yes,
Say,
to the
find out
city's,
if they're
right,
on
the
list or
city's
not, and if the
website.
citation's been-
We put together a really comprehensive question and answer document that goes out with the utility bills. We actually send it to all property owners, whether they have active utility or not. We update it every month, it's on Facebook, it's on the city website, and it answers all those questions about debris.
But part of the problem, we only have one person doing this, and she's just overloaded, isn't she?
Code enforcement? Oh,
She's really
she's,
going around and doing it.
yeah, I mean, it's a big job.
Oh, yeah,
There
it
might,
is. It's a
there's
really
some,
big job.
Jack, there may be copies of those out in the lobby to keep in
Okay.
a document, if you wanna pick one up on your way in.
Yeah, I know the people that owns a little blockhouse behind me are literally, one of them's 88, one of them's 90, and they go to my wife's church. And she talked to them, she said, oh honey, that house is fine, we're gonna come down with our kids when we can, and I'm going, but wait. No.
Is this gonna be for, is it gonna be for, like, blown, things that blew onto their yard? I mean, are you, yeah, okay,
Anything that's in the yard,
okay,
anything that's on the ground that is storm put on the ground.
okay.
And we can come and check where to see about the lots that are directly around me, to see if they're on the list to get cleaned up. How can I check on this?
Well, here's what I will tell you. We put them on the list, but we don't determine whether or not they're eligible. FEMA comes out, they do a site inspection, they determine if they're eligible. They're on the list, that just means they're asking for help. It doesn't mean they're gonna be approved. So,
Okay.
you know, we can't.
So how does FEMA approve? I mean, if they have insurance coverage, I'm assuming FEMA will not.
It's different, and I'm not even gonna try to tell you what the FEMA policies are. We just said, if they approve it, we do it, if they don't approve it, we don't. And we try to stay out of that
What if
because
they
too
purchased the
many
home in its current state? There's one right down 20th Street here.
if
that
they
just-
didn't own it at the time of the storm, I don't think that they're eligible for public assistance.
So
Cause
what's,
you bought it knowing
buy
what
it
you
as
were buying.
is.
so what is their scenario? How long until citations?
That's
and-
gonna be 30 days or shorter if we've already started the violation prior to them purchasing it.
So things should be looking even better soon.
We actually have 36 structures that FEMA has already inspected for demolition. We're just waiting on them to tell us whether or not we can take them
I
down.
thought
We
there
just,
were only 15 on the list.
they approved 8, and we took those down in 2 days. They inspected 36 more about 3 weeks ago, and we're still waiting on the approval to take those down. And then there's about 15 more
Well,
that's
you
been
take-
added to the list.
When you take them down, you don't take the slab, you don't give them a bill-ready lot, right?
Right now, we've appealed the slab issue with FEMA. They have not approved the slabs, but we've appealed that because we believe it's a safety and health hazard, especially those slabs on beach side, because so much of the sand now is covering the slabs and you can't tell where the bolts and the wire are sticking up. And then, it would cost us a lot to determine whether or not the slab had any type of contaminant or if the slab integrity was there. So why force the city to spend
Just
that
get it
money? Because so many of those, the homes now have to be elevated, so the slab is of no use anyway, so we are waiting on an answer from
Has
FEMA.
NBARA asked for any of this concrete and stuff to build additional roofs?
No, as a matter of fact, we actually talked to them and they don't want any of the debris.
Give it all to Jerry Wallace so he can fill in the moat.
He's already
There you
suggested
go.
that. But, so we have one other.
and
Just a heads up to everybody, we have spoken with Duke Energy about the parks in town, and they're willing to support the idea of putting in native plants to re-landscape the parks. As a part of that, the building department now has these brochures. I'm getting these from Extension, and we are going to try to encourage people to go back with some native plants. Long-term, what that means is hopefully people's yards will survive better if they have native plants. And it's not gonna be a forced thing or anything like that, it's just public education. So these are available, as I said, through the building department, and you'll hear more about this as we move forward. We already have a plan for under the Palms Park, for landscaping with native plants. We're gonna be looking at the other parks as they come online to be ready to do something in those. But right now, under the Palms is the only one that's really ready to go in and do some other stuff. So you'll be hearing more about that.
And who is we?
Well,
It's
me is me right now.
it's volunteers, and I think we had, some help from volunteers
Yes.
on the selection of the plants. You'll
Yes.
see that plan at the open house, when we do the open house. We're just waiting on our architects to give us the 2 dates that we can do the open house at the end of the month, the last week in May, to showcase, get public input on the Under the Palms Park landscape plan, the dedicated beach parking, as well as the canal, the 2 canal pavilions at the boat ramp and at, the canal park down on the beach. So we'll have those
I
plans.
completely- yeah.
To further the answer to your question, there's a program in every county called Master Gardeners. And this is being supported by, both Gulf and Bay County have come in and, walked with me in the park, looked at what we're doing there, and they've got input. So we're getting a lot of support from lots of different people. But Master Gardeners Extension Office, then, there's this whole network of native plant groups, and it's a wide world out there, and it's kind of fun and exciting, so.
Where it starts to get hard, because I completely want to do this.
Right.
I've observed the landscape around me, and the
Right.
sable palms did fine. They're apparently
Right.
meant to be here,
That's
so I'm
right.
going back with more sable palms. When it comes to a magnolia, which is best I've tried to determine off of the Florida site, is that a little gem magnolia or the other magnolia? I want the list that tells me this is the
Okay.
preferred species.
Okay, sweet bay magnolia. What you're looking at there is Magnolia virginiana, something like that. But yeah, there are places, and we're trying to, get that available. It's out there with
Can
Extension
you
Service.
provide a list to the city so they can put it on the website? So-
Well, what we're gonna do is, once the public has a chance to give us feedback on the plans, cause that's the next step, we take it to the public, get the public to give us input, and we'll have 2
A
meetings.
plan?
For the 7th Street Park plan,
Okay.
dedicated beach parking, and then the 2 pavilions, that's all gonna be on, that program. Then what we would like to do is get volunteers to help us do the planting at Under the Palms Park, and they can learn with us, and so we'll
Good.
make it an education volunteer day, pass out that, and then, once we have all that, we will make it available in the building department, on the website.
And speaking of volunteers too, don't forget to bring your shovels on the 1st of June.
I was, on that subject, had a doctor's appointment, Panama City Beach,
Uh-huh.
and this physician said, "Oh, you're from Mexico Beach." He goes, "Have you seen the heat maps?" No, sir, I haven't.
Oh,
He said,
gosh.
"Have you seen the pre and post heat maps
It's
based on the deforestation that you've
Yes.
encountered?"
Yeah,
Oh, yes. Your
And I-
bill,
and
your
I have
electric
not,
bill is
so, I
going
mean,
up.
Makes a lot of sense to encourage that. And the sooner someone gives me a list that says, this is the fastest growing that creates the most shade, that's what I'm gonna do.
It's there, and you can find it, and, you know,
It wasn't
this
easy to
is-
find. I
Yeah.
tried. I
Yeah,
just don't
okay,
know
well,
which magnolia and which oak and.
University of Florida has a great
Extension service.
extension service that,
IFAS is the,
yeah, we're zone 9,
Nine.
of the plants, and I think for Florida Zone 9, there's a list of what is considered native for the area.
There is, that's my point. It's a very broad list.
Oh, it's a huge list.
Someone to interpret that and say,
Yeah.
it's this magnolia of the 4, it's this magnolia of the 5 oaks, and for this oak.
and here's what I can tell you, because I've been dealing with this for the last couple of months, and you're right, it is very, very hard, and I spend hours,
Yeah.
you know, doing this. So, but you can call extension office, and those people do know which ones are native.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of resources available to us here. I went to Quincy, IFAS has a garden in Quincy that has all of the native plants. And the guy there, you know, I just drove up there, didn't even tell him I was coming, he spent 2 hours with me, walking around, and he told me, yeah, you wanna do this one, now where you are, this is not a good one. So there are people that know this, the information's out there.
IFAS?
IFAS, that's, stands for Institute of Florida, oh God, I went to UF, I should know this. I knew the head of IFAS. It's their ag and
Okay.
whatever.
Something
It's
else. The F is for.
agriculture and something else with Florida, IFAS. But there are people that know this stuff, and I'm hoping with Tanya's help that we can get some seminars here, you know, public education, to give people those lists, okay? Because there are demonstration gardens all over. There's one at the Reserve in Apalachicola. There's one at the Port St. Joe Library. So-
But those are generally for shrubs, like the one at the
Yes,
library is great
yes.
if you wanna plant shrubs.
Right.
I want
But-
someone to tell me a tree.
Okay.
And not just zone 9 global, because zone 9 goes up to I-10. I want zone 9 within 250
Which-
yards of saltwater spray.
Exactly, there's a book, and I didn't bring it with me, but next time we have a meeting, I'll bring you a book, and it has it has big trees, medium trees, and small trees. It tells you salt tolerance, moisture, sun, all those things, okay?
Nice.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, second. All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Tammy, I got a
Aye,
couple of
aye, aye,
questions.
aye.
Okay.
So you got